Hey guys, I'm making a video on a project that I've been working on, and I wanted to get some practice talking about projects I've worked on and doing things like explaining how they work. So for in my MBA program, I've been studying business analytics, and that's kind of been my major. So I've done a lot of work with regard to data science lately. This is a project that's based around Amazon reviews, Amazon.com reviews. So Amazon publishes a gigantic data set or bunch of data sets of all of their reviews for each product category they sell in on Amazon.com. And it's from like the mid 90s all the way till 2015. So it's over 150 million reviews, and it's a humongous amount of data, and it's been really good practice manipulating it and learning how to work with huge amounts of data. So what you're seeing right now is a spreadsheet of the gift card category. So all the things that they sell on Amazon are divided into categories. So there's gift cards, there's things like baby products, apparel, video games, automotive, all those kinds of things. Gift cards I usually like to use for this kind of thing just because it's the smallest. So each category is like gigabytes of data, even though it's just text, which should give you a good sense of how much I'm working with. So you can see this data set is divided into all these different columns. So you can see there's things like customer ID, star rating, verified purchase, review headline, review body. Review body is the entire body of the review. So some of these are pretty long. So this is what I was working with in this project, and I'll show you some of my code that I used with this. So the purpose of this was to look at all these reviews and try to gain some business insights. So for example, the question that I looked at first was, do people leave higher star rating reviews around the holidays? So people are buying a lot of stuff in November, December, and people are leaving reviews for stuff they've bought in November, December, January. So I wanted to look at that, and there are a few other things I looked at that just basically for fun and for practice. And let's dive into it. The first thing I'm going to do is log into an EC2 instance on the AWS cloud. So I did this whole project on the AWS cloud, basically because I thought it would be good practice to work with the cloud. I think the AWS cloud is really, really cool. So I much prefer to do that over doing something locally. And part of the reason also was I knew that this would be a huge data set, so I knew I would need some kind of. It's because part of the reason is because I knew this was a big data set. I knew I would need a computer or a server with some more horsepower than what is available to me on my super old MacBook, particularly with regard to local memory. So this is a humongous amount of data. It's like 80 gigabytes of data or something that I knew I would likely have to work with in local memory. So anyway, I'll get to that later, but for now, let's just take a look at some of the code. So I'm just going to navigate over there. This is a Python script that I wrote that does a couple things. You'll see the first off in the first line, we're using the pandas library, which is generally kind of the universally accepted data science library for Python. And I'm pretty new to this. I've written Python code before, but I've only really started doing things in data science with Python in the past couple months. So you'll see that I have this function import clean, which imports and, as it sounds like, it imports and cleans each of the TSV files where all these Amazon reviews are located. So a TSV file is the exact same as a CSV, except it's a tab separated value instead of a comma separated value. So you'll see that the pandas has a great function called read CSV, and all you do is give it the local file name and you tell it how the values are separated. So in this case, it's \t, which represents a tab. and I specify which columns I want to use. So those columns 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 14 are the ones that are most relevant to what I'm going to be doing with this data. So I don't recall exactly what they are, but there's things like review date, star rating, number of helpful votes, total votes. You can see the next few lines are related to that. So you'll see these next few lines are setting the data types for this data frame. So we want to make sure that the review date column is a date time type object. So you also notice there's a commented out line called sample. So this was just to take the first 6,000 lines. So as I said before, these TSV files are absolutely enormous. So when I was working on my MacBook, I didn't have enough local memory to import some of these entire files. So I had to use this function df.sample, which just takes a random sampling of 6,000 rows in the data set. So this function, all it does is just import and format the file, and then I have average rating this function. So again, what we were looking at before, what I was hoping to look at is average rating for some of these categories. So this function, all it does is it takes the data frame and finds out exactly the average star rating for all these reviews. And then after these functions are defined, you'll see the actual script running. So we have this reviews data frame. We're creating a new data frame using two columns, star rating and review date, because those are the two that we're interested in at the moment. And then we have a couple lines to find where the files are located locally. In this case, it's on my EC2 instance on this T2, or is it T2 micro, I think it is. And I have this line's commented out, but if you want to, you can use only one TSV file. So next you'll see this declaration, all files using glob. I just kind of found this on Stack Overflow. I'm not totally sure what glob means or what it stands for, but glob is for manipulating files, and it's kind of like an OS type of, it's like OS that you use in Python also. So you see this for loop is something that creates a data frame for each of these TSV files and appends it to the original big data frame. So reviews is the big data frame with everything. So import clean, if you recall, imports all the data from the TSV file and formats it, and then we're adding it to the big reviews file, reviews data frame. Sorry. And then with this giant data frame, we can look at the average rating. So down here, these print statements, you'll see I'm calling average rating that has the parameters of a data set, which is a data frame in this case, and a list of months. So you can see all these numbers here for these two lines are through 1 through 12. And that's corresponding with months. So the first thing we're doing in this print statement is we're looking at the average review rating for November, December, and January, and then the next one we're looking at the average review rating for the rest of the months of the year. So when I run this, the ultimate conclusion was that the star rating is about the same. So no giant insights or anything like that. The star ratings are about the same between the holidays and not. But I didn't stop there. I thought there was a lot more potential with this project, and while that conclusion may not be very interesting, there is lots more to look at. So we're looking at this Python script right now. Oh yeah, by the way, the last line, this creates a new CSV file with the huge giant data frame. So it takes all the TSV files with all the different categories, puts them into one data frame, and then creates a final big CSV file. So you'll see the toCSV function is used there, and that's a great feature of the Pandas library. So we're going to move on. I'll show you some more features of this project. So I just showed you the Python script for the original purpose of this project, and a kind of a thing that I thought would be cool is if I put this data frame into a SQL database. So I don't have much experience with databases. My undergraduate degree was in computer science, but we didn't work much with databases just from the classes I took. So I want to get some practice with SQL databases, and especially with how Python interacts with SQL, and I thought it'd be cool to learn about that. So let's look at the next Python script. All right, here's another Python script. So pretty similar. The first function you'll see is pretty similar. This import clean one, this is identical to what I used before, except this time I'm not specifying specific columns. And there are also a couple other parameters in the read CSV function. So before we talk about that, I'll back up a little bit. You'll see these first few lines for MySQL connector. This is a really cool Python library that allows you to do things like SQL queries through Python. So you can manipulate a SQL database using a Python script. And I found this just browsing the internet and trying to figure out different tools for what I was trying to accomplish. So what we're doing here is first connecting to an external remote database. So I've taken out the host name and username and password and all that stuff because this video is going to be public on the internet, so I obviously don't want to show my password and login and all that kind of stuff. But that's where you'd put your host name and username and all that. And again, this relational database is actually also located on the AWS cloud. So they have a great tool for creating databases that I used for this project. Anyway, so moving on, the import clean file is almost identical to what you saw before, and there's a couple other parameters in the read CSV file. So this is just things like ignoring corrupt data and ignoring rows that the function doesn't like. So basically, we're dealing with dirty data most of the time with this. Although the Amazon review data sets are pretty good. There aren't that many. It is pretty clean to start with. So the cool part now that's totally different from the script that we looked at before was this create. You'll see this create table function. So there's a whole bunch of repeating lines for this creation string. For this creation string object. And if you're familiar with SQL, you'll notice there's some familiar words in here. So what we're doing right now is creating a SQL table, or writing the command to create a SQL table. So you'll see in all caps create table, and name is taken as a parameter in this function. So the name of the table will vary based on which data set we're using. So all of these columns we're adding in this table correspond exactly to the columns in the TSV files of the Amazon reviews. You'll notice that all these data types vary a little bit based on the type of data. So, for example, product ID is always 20 characters, so I knew that that column would always be 20 characters long. But some of these other ones are basically just kind of arbitrary or based on a guess of mine. So if you look at review body, that's going to be the biggest one. So I made that 500 characters, and that's just kind of anecdotal, like just from me browsing through the review body. I didn't really see any reviews longer than that, and I didn't want to give it too big because then the database gets huge. So this makes a one long SQL query, and then cur is the connection to the remote database, and execute acts as though this is a SQL query. So, and then we commit it. It's just like GitHub. You commit it and then it executes. So this function creates a SQL database, or creates a table in the remote SQL database. So these functions are defined up here, and if we come down below that, you'll see all files. And again, using glob, we're looking for every file that ends in TSV. And of course, this is something that I also removed just because it's public information. This is going on the internet, but normally you'd specify a file path to where the Amazon reviews are located. So if you look at these lines, you have to clean the data a little bit. So we're taking off the TSV part, and S is going to be the name of the table. So the name of the TSV file corresponds to the name of the table that this data is going to be located in. And when we're in our SQL database, we don't want the names of each table to end in TSV because then it looks ugly. So then we call create table, and we create a table for every one of these TSV files. And remember, we're inside of a loop right now, so each iteration of this loop is creating a table. Okay, now the cool part, if you're looking at the next line, you'll see load data local in file. So this is a really cool SQL functionality that lets you take a TSV or CSV file and just plug it right into a table. So originally when I wrote this, I had a giant loop that was an insert for every single row of this TSV file. And remember, we're dealing with 150 plus million reviews. So it took me like hours and hours when I initially did it that way. But I found this cool command called load data local in file. So what this does is it just takes a CSV file and it plugs the whole thing into the table based on the columns that are of the table you've created. So remember, in the previous function in create table, all the columns in that table correspond exactly to the columns in the TSV file. I wanted to make sure I could see the exact SQL query when I'm loading this data, so I have it printed out there. And then again, cur.execute, and then I commit it. So, and then we loop back. So all files, if you recall, is an array of every TSV file of these data sets. So now after executing this Python script, we have a table for every one of the data sets in the TSV files in a SQL database. So now, naturally, we're going to go log into the remote database and play around there. So now we're connected to my MySQL server that's also on the AWS cloud. And if you're familiar with AWS terminology, these are in the same VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So now you can see all these tables correspond with product categories of Amazon reviews. So we have all the Amazon reviews in a database that we can use to easily manipulate and look at different reviews on an individual basis or however we want to. So for example, let's start off simple and just look at how many reviews there are in a couple of these different tables. So if we look at the video games table, sorry, whoops, that's a typo. I seem to always forget words in my SQL queries like that. So if we look at the number of reviews in the video games table, this will take a couple seconds, so I'll cut out the however long it takes. So we'll see, okay, yeah, we have 1.7 million reviews in the video games table. And, oh yeah, something that's important is I'll show you, you can see which columns we're working with for some of these. So all of these different tables have the exact same columns in them, and these are what they are. So if you recall when we were looking earlier at the Excel sheet, looking at the TSV file, we saw the exact same column names. So these are all the columns of all these different tables. So we saw there's 1.7 million of them for video games. So let's look at a couple others. We'll just do PC. And again, this will take a couple seconds, so I'll cut that out of the video. So PC has 6.9 million reviews. So again, this should give you a good sense of how much data we're actually working with. And you can see, I cut it out of the video, but you can see that that query took 48 seconds. So let's look at some other cool stuff. So for example, let's look at product title, star rating, product title and star rating, and how about kitchen? And this should show us all of the rows in the kitchen data in the kitchen category, and we're looking at just the product title and the star rating, so we can see what people think of certain things. And again, this will take a few seconds, so I'll cut this out of the video so it's quicker. All right, so yeah, obviously, as you saw before, we're dealing with millions and millions of reviews at a time. So the screen is kind of freaking out right now, and I'll probably cut this out too because it's just kind of overwhelming. Okay, that was kind of ridiculous. It took 32 seconds, and I probably shouldn't have done that query because it was so big. But you can see we can look at specifically what star rating people gave for different things in the kitchen category. And something that's important to know is that these reviews correspond to individual reviews and not products. So you might see some repeats in here where people have reviewed one product more than once. So this is based on reviews, not products. So let's look at something that's a little bit more interesting. So let's go back to looking at the tables. So just so you can see here, let's do something that's more interesting, I think. So So what we're doing with this query is we're looking at the product title, star rating, and review headline columns from the video games table. And we're looking at all the rows where the review headline contains the word terrible. So basically we're looking at all the video games where someone left a review with the word terrible in the review headline, which usually is pretty entertaining. So let's see what we got. And again, this will probably take some time, and I'll cut it out to shorten the video. So if you look through what we're looking at right now, you can see some of these review headlines. So I'm just going to look for some games that I might be familiar with. So for example, at the very top, we have Grand Theft Auto, the first one. 1 star, grat idea, ... terrible execution. Time Splitters for PS2, which I really like, is a game I personally really like. 2 stars, graphics good, control terrible. And you can see why this is kind of entertaining. You can look at all these different reviews and look at the review headlines. So something that I really want to do next, which I haven't implemented yet, is given that we have this insane amount of data, this is enough to create a training data set for a machine learning algorithm. So if you look at the correlation between language used and star rating, in theory, we should be able to do something that uses natural language processing and machine learning to understand the correlation between certain adjectives and certain verbiage that corresponds with star rating. So for example, the objective would be to be able to look at an Amazon review, either a headline or a review body, and have this program read through it and be able to predict a star rating. So you can see all these times that people have used the word terrible in the review headline. Most of the time they're leaving a 1-star review if you just look at the screen right now. So that's just an idea I had I thought would be cool, and there's a whole bunch of other potential with this SQL database with all these Amazon reviews, and I hope to add some features soon, and I hope to make another video. So thanks for watching. I just wanted to talk a little bit about a project I was working on some stuff that I think is cool, and I'll see you in the next one.